It is now March the 9th, 2019. We are at the Taneytown History Museum, which is located at 340 East Baltimore Street here in Taneytown, Maryland. And we are going to talk about how World War II impacted Taneytown, which was our hometown. There are three of us here this morning. Jim Flair, here to my right. He's a little bit older than I was, and he was in high school at the time World War II was taking place. Jean Brown is here to my left. She graduated in 1943, but she has many memories of things that went on during World War II. I guess I'm the youngest of the crowd, and I'm Fairy Flickinger, and I graduated in 1952, so I was quite young when World War II was taking place. But I did talk with some of my classmates, and together we came up with some things that were going on and that we remember happened at that time. So, Jim, do you have anything you want to tell us about World War II that you remember?
Well, I guess you're talking about the rationing, probably. Talk about that. Gas rationing, food rationing. I forget what all was, right? I know sugar was, I know that for sure. But you had ration stamps. In school, one of the things that people can't believe is that we made ammunition boxes in shop. The principal, George Shower, and the shop teacher, who I don't remember who it was, set up an assembly line, and I am sure, I've asked others and they can't remember, but I'm sure that Grayson Shank from Elmer Wolf Union Bridge was involved too. He probably came in the evenings because some of us came back to work in the evenings. I guess we got some pay, I don't remember. But they were solid ends, a box maybe 3 feet long as I remember, and then it had strips of wood on the side like a crate. And I would imagine that something like a small bomb or something like that were what was put in them, but that we made those for the war effort. Remember the Victory Gardens? Everybody was supposed to have a garden because of the food shortage and so on. So that's some immediate memories.
Jean, what would you like to tell us?
Well, some of my memories tell how World War II affected our senior class. One thing, we were practicing a play, Mumbo Jumbo, and we went up there about twice a week, and our teacher had to drive from Westminster and use her gasoline rationing, and we were about ready to have it showing, and one morning, Mr. Shire, our principal, showed up at the door and said to the homeroom teacher, "I hear you're going to produce a play and have a play here at Taneytown High School." And she said, "Yes, we are, and it's going to be next month, so-and-so date." He said, "Well, you're not going to have a play. Who do you think is going to come to a play with the gasoline rationing?" So that was first disappointment. Then it got to around prom time, and our class voted to have it at the Richard McAllister Hotel in Hanover, which a lot of the classes before us went there. And again, we got a knock on the door one morning, and Mr. Shire was there, and somehow he heard of that plan, and again he said, "You are not going out of Taneytown for the senior prom. You're going to have it here. Why can't you have it in the gym?" That was fairly new. It had just been built within a few years. Well, none of us wanted to have it there, so we ended up having it at Sobel's Inn. And my escort that night was Wirt Crapster, who lives uptown beside of the present fire company to the right. He walked all the way out for me. We both walked more than a mile to Sobel's Inn, me in my peach gown, which certainly looked quite a bit for wear when I got home. So then when it was over, he walked me all the way out to my house, which is beyond this point, and then back to his house. And even with gas rationing, his father was a postal worker. And I thought, why didn't those two fathers get together and say, well, I'll drive you and someone else come for us? But that didn't happen. Well, that was another disappointment. And then talking about blackouts. During that play practice, we had turned on to East Balmer Street from George Street, and the siren went for the blackout. And we got stopped right out front of this building. And we were in, and the fireman said, pull over to the curb, turn the lights off, and I got out of the car, and he said, where are you going? I said, I only live up the street, about 6 houses, and I need to get home, get back in the car, he said. Well, I sat there a little bit more, and then I thought, well, this is ridiculous, as close as I live. And once again, I attempted to get out to talk to the fireman and said, I have to get home, I have some homework I need to finish, plus I even told him I have to roll my hair up for tomorrow. And he said, please get back in the car and don't get out again. So, and like Jimmy mentioned about the rationing, we had a neighbor, Mrs. Percy Putman, who had way back then a bed and breakfast, but she called it a tourist home. But once in a while, because she had to do extra cooking, she'd run out of the sugar coupons, and once in a while she'd come and knock on my mom's door and say, could you please let me borrow one of your sugar coupons and I'll pay you back next month when they come.
All right, I guess we're around to me, and if you have anything you would like to say while I'm talking, feel free. First of all, my husband lived down the old Taneytown Road, what is now 832, on a farm. And he says he remembers the troops on horseback going up and down that road. And then I had another friend who remembered the troops, they were on drill, I'm assuming, came in the Emmitsburg Road. And Janet Powell, who lived on West Baltimore Street, would have something for them to drink and some snacks of some sort. So I did not remember that particular part, but those people told me that. Another thing I remember, my home was here on York Street in Taneytown, and we were quite young at the time. I was born in 1934, so you know, 41 to 45, young. So they would take the children in our class, maybe 15 or 20, to my home, and 2 of our classmates were guides for us, Marlon Rittes and Dale Stauffer. Both are deceased at this time, but they would go along to my home, and my mother would take us to the basement and pull the shades down so that they could not see us in the basement. And this one boy that was in our class said, I remember she always gave us something to drink and a snack of some sort. So, and that was a little height from the high school, because the school, all 11 and 12, well, it was 11 grades at that time, were in the high school, which was on George Street. And I lived on York Street, so it was 2 streets over, so we had to go across, well, we called it the dry bridge, on Roberts Mill Road and go to Middle Street, Fairview Avenue, and then on to my home on York Street. We had what we called Civil Air Patrol. As I remember, or anything that I've been told, most of those people were women. Now, I'm sure there were some men involved, but the women would had places they went and would watch for the planes, is the way I understand it. Another
Can I?
Excuse me for,
Yeah.
but I was so pleased this morning when Ferry brought that up, because I've been for the last 5 years, and in fact, I saw Jimmy at the Winners Church at least 4 or 5 years ago and brought that subject up, and he looks at me puzzled and said, I don't remember anything like that. And since then, at the Alumni Association this past June, I asked everyone around me, which would have been, they would have been involved, not one person remembered that. I felt and did give her a big squeeze this morning, because they had me thinking that I was the one, that my mental capacity was failing.
Well, I remember the airplane spotters because our Boy Scouts helped do that in the evenings. There was a building beside Roberts Mill Road, a little larger than a phone booth, but there was a little building there that was airplane spotter station, and we would man that in like on a Friday evening or a Saturday evening, I think, and had a phone in it. If you heard an airplane, you phoned in and told them what direction you thought it was going and where it was coming from and so on. So that I was an airplane spotter too at that time.
Do you think you might have gone to your home, which doesn't, stand out in your memory, because
I don't remember the safe homes. I thought we hid. I remember hiding under the desk, getting under the desk. You had to get under the desk when it was an air raid alarm,
in my shelter,
or just a
in my shelter home was the Crapster home,
okay.
which
My goodness.
the one to the right of the fire company. And I can remember running across that Roberts Mill Bridge Road, and I was usually the first or second person to arrive. I would even beat Mert, and he was way taller and big long legs, but I would generally get to his home before he ever arrived.
I interrupted you.
That's all
Yeah,
right.
go ahead.
It's fine.
She said we could.
Yeah, that's part of it. Another thing, my father delivered bread over the country. He was a bread salesman. And I know tires were rationed,
Yeah.
and the rubber. And he needed a new truck. And he was a Chevy person. Well, he couldn't get a Chevy truck, so he had to take a Dodge. And I know he grumbled and groaned about that. But anyway, I think as soon as the war was over and the rationing was over, he did get another truck so he could continue. However, the Dodge took him where he needed to go. The other thing that I remember, we bought savings stamps and savings bonds. And we were in the 3rd grade at the time. Mrs. Couts, Mrs. Esther Couts was our teacher. And I'm assuming that we were seated alphabetically, because my husband's Robert Flickinger and I was Fairy Frog. So I'm assuming he was right in front of me. Well, I bought 50-cent stamps. He bought 5 10-cent stamps. Well, Mrs. Couts thought I got them all, and I guess I agreed to that. And Bob didn't get his stamps to take home. And he told Mrs. Counts that he got stamps too, and she did not believe him. And he, to this day, doesn't have good thoughts about her. He said she just shook the tar out of him over me. And so, but then he married me. Isn't that amazing? But anyhow, his dad had to come into the school to get that straightened out. So he got his stamps, and then I got my stamps, however many I got.
Well, he figured he had to marry you to get his 50 cents back.
Well, anyhow, and then I guess we got bonds after we got so many stamps. I think that's the way it was. Do you all remember that?
Do you remember shoe rationing, either one? It wasn't at first, it was
No.
after. I sort of remember
can
that
imagine.
we even got that because of the, of course, shoes mostly then were made with leather and they needed,
I don't remember that, but
it's,
those are some of my memories. I do remember V-Day. And my parents, we went uptown and everybody was out celebrating.
yes,
The sirens were blowing, the church bells were ringing,
I remember that.
and that was a wonderful day because the war essentially was over. So I do remember that. That was in '45, so I was, by that time, 11 years old. So that, I was a little older to remember that.
Talking about the gas rationing, I worked for Harry Doherty's grocery store, and there was a guy named Hunk Smith, I'm almost sure,
Oh, I remember
had
that.
an old car that had the seats torn out and the back doors off of it, and he would come and collect the trash. If you had things food going bad, he would collect that and take it and feed his hogs with it. Well, he went to Gettysburg for some reason or other one Sunday, and the cops stopped him and said, "Sir, you're not allowed pleasure driving on Sundays. Do you realize that?" And he said, "If you think it's a pleasure driving this thing, you just get in here and try it."
Well, this probably isn't along the line of World War II, but do any of you remember a woman, Lot Stuller?
Oh yeah, Lottie. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I remember this lady, and nobody else seemed to remember.
Oh, yeah.
But Jim, you do remember her.
Because she would come in the store.
Where did she live?
No, I don't know. I don't remember that. I really
Well, you know, we're talking about characters here at the museum, and she, to me, would have been a
don't.
character.
She was a character.
Um,
Yes.
But nobody else, well now, other than you, Jim, seemed to remember her.
Yep.
And I don't
Sure
know
do.
where she fit in with World War II, but probably in that era.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Would have been.
I don't
And
know.
also, if you went to the movies, remember how you looked at least 10, 15 minutes of pictures of the war.
Yeah. That's true.
If you were lucky enough back then to have money enough to go to the movies.
Of course, the food shortage was a
Oh,
problem.
yes.
There was a portable at the school. 3rd and 4th grades, I believe, were in the portable. It was 2
Mhm.
rooms in
Miss
the
Jordan.
portable before the addition was put on.
Mhm.
When the addition was put on the school, what year would that have been?
That
I
was,
don't know.
Anyway, the portable was turned around and sat in back of the school. So our class raised chickens in that portable,
Mhm.
and we paid for the junior senior prom with the money we made on raising peeps. We'd get them in the brooder. You'd have to go up at night and check on them and so on. I would do that. We would take turns, some of us.
for heaven's sake.
And Sal lived very close, and I lived pretty close, and we would check on the peepees at night and raise to broiler size, sell them, get another lot of chickens. So we had a chicken house in the portable that belonged to the Board of Education. Good memories there. A lot of fun, really. And it was good training for everybody.
Of course, one of my classmates, Elwood Frame, was one of the first casualties, I think, around here. And then they had a Navy program called V-12, which was only if you were eligible, if you were quite bright in the science or math. And we had one that qualified for that, Harmon Stone, qualified for that V-12, which was supposed to be something quite different than the ordinary Army, Navy, Marine Corps. You were aware were you aware of that V-12?
Didn't
You'd have been
remember
old
that.
enough.
Didn't remember that. I remember the jail up on Riffles Alley, the big steel can, and that was cut up and hauled away for the war effort for scrap metal. That's when they got rid of that during the war. Don't know exactly what year, but I remember going up and watching them cut that thing up.
And just in this morning's Carroll County Times showed President Eisenhower
Right.
getting off the plane to come to the Cambridge Rubber Company. Do you get the Carroll County Times still?
No.
Yeah,
No.
I was surprised that
No.
that was in there this morning.
Saw that in there.
Darn.
Yeah.
I remember my dad and your dad apparently, and some of the men that belonged to, I think they call them the Minutemen.
Yes.
I hope I'm in the right war.
Yeah. Mhm.
But that was a volunteer organization, and I don't know what they were for. I remember marching in a parade, and I remember my mother worrying about that they were going to issue them guns. But I don't think
I
they
have a
did.
picture of my father in his uniform somewhere. I have not found it recently, but yeah, he was in it. And then I had an uncle who was in the service. And he was wounded, I think it was in Germany. It was in Germany or France, I'm not exactly sure, but yes.
I had a lot of relatives in the war. I figured up when I knew I was going to do this, I think I had between the two sides of my family 8 first cousins.
Mm.
And of course, Keith, but we weren't married during the war, but he was a World War II veteran.
Probably most of our memories, so.
Okay, well, thank you very much.